Hello guys, welcome to Cisco with Amansoni, and in this video we are going to talk about IP addresses. So let's move on to the today topics. So these are the topics, the questions that we are going to cover today. What is an IP address? Why do we need the IP addresses? And few basic myth regarding the IP addresses, like what is the range of IP addresses? What is the classification of IP addresses? And who classifies the IP address for the whole world? I mean about our earth only. Okay, so if you have more than 2 3 devices, can they have same IP addresses or do they have to be different? All the things you will answer within next 10 minutes. So without further delay, let's move on to the slides. So, what the first thing, what is an IP address? My friends, IP address is a logical address of your device, of your machine, that is assigned either by you, the network engineer, the network admin, or you will be getting it automatically from a server. Okay, so what is an IP address? A logical address, a logical identification of your device on the network. It is just like when you're sending a letter to your friend and you have to write his postal address. So when you're sending the data, sending the letter to your friend, you have to give the postal address that you want to send this particular letter to this friend on this location. So in the same way, in your network or the whole network, the internet, you have to tell what is the IP address of the destination. Either you are writing a mail, you are sending some images via mail, you are using Facebook, you are downloading a torrent, you are downloading a movie. You have to have the communication, and for the communication you have to give the IP address. If you don't have the IP address on both sides, source IP address and destination IP address, you can never ever do the communication. Just like you have, if you want to send the data, the letter postcard to your friend, you have to have your address and his address. Why your address? So that he can reply back to you. So how does IP address looks like? It looks like something like this in decimal digits: 192.168.1.1, or it can be like 8.8.8.8. Okay, so technically they looks like this: a dot b dot c dot d, where all these abcds are actually numbers, decimal numbers. So in binary format, if somebody asks you what is the size of IP address or what is inside an IP address, you can answer that IP address consists of 4 blocks, and within each block you have 8 bits. So what is the total size of IP address? 4 into 8 is 32 bits. That is the size of our IP address. If you want, you can even count down these bits. There are total 32 bits in an IP address. And this here is an example of how they're used in a network. So in here, I'm using, like, I'm having two different networks. This is my network and this is my friend's network. So in my network, I'm having some IP addresses: 192.168.1.1, 1.2, 1.3. These three PCs can communicate with each other, and my friend is having the same network. He can also have the communication. So now, can we have the same IP addresses in these two networks? You tell me. Take a minute to think. Can you? Yes, you can. Why? Because these two networks are not connected with each other. They are completely different. Okay, they are isolated. So they can have the same IP addresses. But the moment you connect these two networks via a cable or via some router or via some other device, you can never ever do this thing. Why? Because the IP address have to be unique in your network. Okay, so that was our second question. Can two devices have same IP address in a network? No, they cannot. If you do that, you will immediately get an error message. Okay, so if the networks are separate, yes, you can have same IPs. If no, you have to change the IP address. Okay, so let's move on to next one. Can communication can happen in a network without IP addresses? So first let me ask you, can you send a postcard without your friend's address? No, you cannot. So same thing, if you don't have the destination IP address, you can never ever do the communication. Okay, so now let's move on to the technical stuff. What is the range of IP addresses, how they are classified, and IP addresses, and much more. To the next slide. Yes, so don't get scared, just some technical facts you have to remember about IP addresses. By looking at the IP addresses, if you pay close attention to the very first block, you can identify the IP address. Okay, so if in the first block the range is from 0 to 127, that IP address belongs to class A. If the in the first octet the range is from 128 to 191, the IP address belongs to class B. If it is from 192 to 223, it belongs to class C. 224 to 239 in the first octet belongs to class D, and from 240 to 255 it belongs to class E. Now the rest of the digits you don't have to pay much attention, they can be anything from 0 to 255. Okay, that is the highest range you can have in an octet. It will be only from 0 to 255. Why? Because in the previous slide I told you within each octet you have 8 binary digits, and if you write down 8 binary digits like this, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8, it will look something like this. Okay, and if you convert this thing into decimal, then you will be having nothing but 255. Okay, so the minimum value you can have is 0, and the maximum value within each octet you can have is 255. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so remember these range. If you can look at any IP, you can immediately tell this IP belongs to class A, B, C, D or E, and among these five classes only class A, B and C you can use. These are the three usable IP addresses classes. Class D and E sadly you cannot use. Why? Because class D is reserved for multicasting. What is multicasting? Multicasting means when you are sending a packet, you are sending to few people. Okay, so these multicasting IP addresses are used by different protocols, a topic for the later lectures. So leave it. Okay, just for now, remember class D IP addresses are used for multicasting. That's it. So class E 240 to 255, it is reserved, but for what? For experimentation and for future use by Department of Defense of United States of America. So, and what is this thing? This thing is the soulmate of IP address. Whenever you assign IP address, IP addresses are never alone. When you assign IP address to a machine, to a device, to a laptop, to a smartphone, to a printer, to a router, whenever you assign IP address, they are always accompanied by a subnet mask. What is a subnet mask? It is used to distinguish the IP address between the network and host. Okay, it is used to tell what part in your IP address belongs to the network and what part belongs to the host. Okay, so for the class A, we are having 255.0.0.0 as the subnet mask. If you do that, it means the 255 part belongs to the network. So if we are having IP something like 10.10.10.10, then the very first block, the first 10 belongs to the network. Okay, for the class B, the first two blocks belongs to the network, and for the class C, first three blocks belong to the network. Okay, let me give you an example of that. Okay, why the subnet mask is so necessary. So let's imagine we have a PCA and we have a PCB directly connected, and I'm giving a IP address like this 255.255.255.0, and for the PCB I'm giving 192.168.1.2 and 255.255.255.0. Now why this particular subnet mask? Because this IP address belongs to class C. You can look at the range from 192 to this, it belongs to class C, and if it is class C, by default it will be using this subnet mask. And this subnet mask says that first three blocks belong to the network. It means these three blocks belong to the network. So if 192.168.1 is matching on both sides, it means that both PC belongs to the same network. You can even write it like this. What is the network part? 192.168.1. And what is the network part here? Yes, you are right. 192.168.1. If the network part is same, then only these two PCs can communicate with each other, even if they are directly connected. Meaning, if I go in there and if I change the IP to 192.168.2, immediately they will stop communicating with each other. So that is the importance of subnet mask. If you want to do the communication, you have to make sure that if it is 192.168.1 here, it is 192.168.1 here as well. Why? Because subnet mask says that the network part on both sides have to match in directly connected devices. So that's why all these three classes have their corresponding default subnet mask. Let me prove it to you. Let's go to the adapters of our system itself. Network settings, manage known networks, I guess. Oops, not here. So right click, yeah, here, open network and sharing center, and let's go to the adapters. So let's choose any random adapter, right click, properties, IPv4, that's how you assign IP address. So let's try to assign some IP address from class A, which is from 0 to 127. Let's try to assign 10.1.1.1, and as soon as you click here, it will automatically choose the default subnet mask. That is what I want to show you. If you go in there and if you want to assign a IP address of class B 172.18.1.9, this IP belongs to class B 128 to 191. When you click there, it will automatically choose the subnet mask of class B, and same thing for 192.168.8.10. If you do that, this IP belongs to class C, and it will automatically take out the subnet mask of class C, as you can see. So let's leave this. So now you know there are 5 classes, 3 are usable, 2 are reserved. What are subnet mask? Why IP addresses are always with their corresponding subnet mask. So now these are the total IP addresses that you can use. So what the authority, the highest authority, I will tell you the name later, who created these and classified these IP addresses, they did what? Among these 3 classes A, B and C, they grabbed few IP addresses and put them for reserve for the private range, okay, for the private use in your private networks, and all the remaining IPs are available for the public usage on the internet. So it means if your PC is connected to the internet, if your smartphone is connected to the internet, you have to use a public IP address. Okay, so what are the private IP addresses? From class A, you grabbed this range from 10.0.0.0 to 10.255.255.255. This whole range is the private IP address of class A, and this 172.16.0.0 to 172.16.31.255 is the private IP address range of class B, and this 192.168.0.0 to 192.168.255.255 belongs to class C private IP addresses. Okay, so what are these private IP addresses that you are allowed to use within your private network which is not connected to the internet? If you are connected to the internet, then you have to use the remaining ones. You have to use the remaining public IPs. So now if I ask you the IP 7.8.9.10 is a private or public, so now you can easily tell that that IP is a public IP address. Okay, so these are the private IP addresses. If you are not connected to the internet, you can do the connectivity in your network using private IP addresses only. This what I have done in the previous slide. Look here, within my network I am using a private IP address range 192.168, and this is the most famous private IP address range that you will see in your network, in your PCs, and in your like a lot of places, in cafes and in companies, in private networks, the most usable class of private IP addresses. All the remaining IPs, meaning from those like 0 to 9 and all from 11 to 127 are for public IP usage. And like in here 128 to 171, and after this 172, 16, 32 to 191, all the remaining are for public usage. And let me tell you about the few reserved IP addresses. Okay, reserved networks to be precise. In class A you can use the whole networks except these, and except these networks. These two networks are reserved for class A. You can see this is the very first one and last one. Okay, why these are reserved? These are used by your routers. Why, we will talk about when we will go to routing and static and dynamic and main CCNA stuff. We will talk about why this 0 IP is reserved. And this IP starting with 127 is reserved for loopback testing. Yes, the whole range. Starting with 127 you cannot use anything. So this was for class A. From class B, not B, class B, our our 169.x.x.x. This range is reserved for automatic IP address assignment, the APIPA range. Okay, from automatic IP address assignment is this range is reserved. If your PC or laptop somehow fails to get an IP address either manually or automatically, then it will be assigning an IP address from this range to itself. So that is why this whole range is reserved. The next one is class C. From class C, nothing is reserved. If you want, you can use all of them. Okay, so let's continue. Private and public. So this can be a little bit confusing. Let me clarify this a little bit. I have a topology ready for you guys. So what is this? A very small network. This is my company, very small company. I have only 3-4 PCs and I'm connected to the internet via one router. So my friends, when you are not connected to the internet, or if you don't want to use internet, then you can very easily do the connectivity with these IP addresses which are private. But if you want that, okay, your PCs should be able to go to the internet, then you have to use a public IP. Like what? Like this, something like 110.4.5.7, something like this. You have to make your PCs use some sort of public IPs so that you can reach the internet, because if you send the data from this IP to the internet, as soon as the data will go and the internet will, like the routers on the internet will see this packet is coming from 192.168.1.3, a private IP address, it will immediately drop the packet. So it have to be coming from a public IP address. So if you're having IP like this, you can never ever reach the internet. You have to have your public IP. And if you're connected to the internet right now, you will be having a public IP yourself. So let's move on. So our questions were, we know what is the range of IP addresses, the classification, and what are public and private IP addresses. So my friends, if you have any doubt regarding these, you can post in comments or feel free to direct email to me. I will make sure to answer all your queries. So the next thing, one very special question I put it here: who assign the IP address and who classify them? Meaning in simple English, who did this, who did all these stuff, IP assignment, like breaking into classes private and public, and who decide which country gets what public IP. Okay, because every country will be having some pool of public IP addresses. So who decides all that? So allow me to introduce to you the authority, the big boss, which is INA, Internet Assigned Numbers Authority. It is a non-profit private American corporation which is responsible for the global IP address. This whole mumbo jumbo is done by the INA. How the INA thing did this? It divided the whole country into different regional registries. Okay, RIR, regional internet registry, the whole world, and it divides the continents into five places. Okay, so these are Afrinic, Lacnic, Aran, Ripenic, and our own Ethnic. Okay, where like I am staying. Okay, you might be anywhere among these four. So if you are staying in whatever country or continent, you will be assigning the public IPs by this particular respective registry of yours. And all these registries are handled by RIR, Regional Internet Registry, and which is again handled by INA. Okay, so don't get confused. That's how the whole internet thing works. That's how you get the IP addresses. Okay, so I hope this was informative for you, and stay tuned for my next lecture. In my next lecture, I am going to talk about subnetting, one of the scariest topic of CCNA. Okay, so I will try my best to make subnetting easy for you guys. So keep calm and just go.